In 2018, the world watched as Donald Trump's administration launched a series of tariffs that sent shockwaves through global economies. While many saw them as mere trade tools, their impact was far from trivial. These tariffs, targeting over $360 billion worth of Chinese goods, were not just about negotiating better trade terms. They represented a broader strategy to redefine global economic alliances. Fast forward to 2025, and the ripple effects are still felt, with shifts in manufacturing bases, price hikes on consumer goods, and strained international relations. But beneath the surface, these tariffs have transformed into economic weapons, shaping geopolitical dynamics. The real question is, were these tariffs simply about trade, or were they a calculated move in an economic war strategy?
Most people perceive tariffs as a straightforward economic tool used to protect domestic industries by making imported goods more expensive. It's a common belief that tariffs primarily serve to level the playing field against countries with cheaper labor costs. This belief suggests that tariffs are a temporary measure, a means to an end designed to encourage local production and reduce trade deficits. However, this perspective often overlooks the broader strategic motives and the long-term repercussions on global supply chains. The assumption is that eventually these tariffs will be rolled back once trade balances are restored. Yet, the reality is far more complex, as these measures often lead to retaliatory tariffs, disrupting global trade flows and creating economic uncertainty.
Beneath the surface of tariff policies lies a complex web of economic dynamics that many overlook. While tariffs are ostensibly about protecting local industries, they often serve deeper geopolitical aims. For instance, they can be used to exert pressure on nations to comply with broader political agendas or to disrupt strategic industries. Tariffs can also be a response to perceived imbalances in trade relations, acting as a counterweight to foreign subsidies. Furthermore, the imposition of tariffs can lead to shifts in global supply chains, forcing companies to reevaluate their manufacturing bases and potentially leading to increased regionalization. This hidden interplay reveals that tariffs are not just economic levers, but are also tools of broader international strategy. The core economic puzzle at the heart of Trump's tariff strategy is why these tariffs appear to serve more than their conventional purpose. Typically, tariffs are seen as a means to protect domestic jobs or industries. Yet, under Trump's administration, they became tools in a broader economic strategy, designed not just to balance trade deficits, but to recalibrate global economic power dynamics. This raises questions about the true motives behind these tariffs. Are they merely economic measures, or do they serve as instruments of economic warfare? The video will delve into this complex issue, exploring the strategic calculus behind these tariff implementations and their wider implications on the global stage. The strategic question that emerges is how Trump's tariff policies have redefined economic alliances and what this means for the future of global trade. By using tariffs as economic weapons, the intention was not only to challenge traditional trade partners, but also to establish new alliances based on economic leverage. This approach raises fundamental questions about the sustainability of such tactics and their impact on international relations. Are these new alliances robust enough to withstand economic pressures, or are they simply temporary arrangements? The video will explore these strategic dimensions, analyzing how Trump's economic war strategy might set a precedent for future administrations and reshape the global economic landscape. To grasp the full impact of Trump's tariff strategy, we must dissect multiple layers of economic dynamics. First, we'll explore the historical development of tariff policies and their use as economic tools. Next, we'll analyze the structural forces within the financial system that allowed tariffs to become strategic instruments. We'll then delve into policy decisions and strategic incentives that guided these implementations. Hidden systemic risks and global economic comparisons will be highlighted to understand the broader implications. By the end of this video, you'll gain a comprehensive understanding of how Trump's tariff strategy unfolded and what it means for the future of global economic relations. The origins of using tariffs as economic tools date back centuries, with nations historically leveraging them to protect nascent industries and generate revenue. During the mercantilist era, tariffs were crucial for colonial powers seeking to control trade routes and ensure resource inflow. In the 20th century, tariffs were often employed during economic downturns to shield domestic markets from foreign competition. However, the late 20th century saw a shift towards free trade and globalization, with tariffs being reduced in favor of multilateral agreements. This backdrop set the stage for Trump's tariff strategy, which harkens back to protectionist policies but with a modern twist, using tariffs not only for economic protection but as a geopolitical tool to influence global power dynamics. As the 21st century dawned, the global economic landscape was increasingly characterized by free trade agreements and economic interdependence. This era saw the rise of organizations like the World Trade Organization, which facilitated multilateral negotiations to reduce trade barriers. However, the financial crisis of 2008 exposed vulnerabilities in this interconnected system, leading to a resurgence of protectionist sentiments. Trump's election capitalized on these sentiments, advocating for a return to America First policies and re-evaluating trade agreements. His administration's tariff policies were a direct response to perceived injustices in global trade, aiming to renegotiate terms that were seen as unfavorable to the United States. This policy evolution marked a significant shift from the previous decade's trend towards liberalization.
Financial innovations in the 21st century have fundamentally altered the way economies interact. The rise of digital currencies, fintech platforms, and advanced trading algorithms has created a new landscape for international trade. These innovations have made it easier to bypass traditional trade barriers, complicating the impact of tariffs. For instance, companies can now use blockchain technology to streamline supply chains, reducing costs and mitigating the effects of tariffs. Additionally, the advent of digital currencies provides new avenues for international transactions, potentially circumventing traditional banking systems. Trump's tariff strategy, therefore, operates within a complex economic environment where traditional tools must adapt to technological advancements, challenging the efficacy of tariffs as standalone measures.
Key policies during Trump's administration focused on renegotiating trade deals and imposing tariffs on major trading partners like China and the European Union. These policies aimed to address trade imbalances and protect American industries. The tariffs on Chinese goods were particularly significant, targeting key sectors such as technology and manufacturing. Additionally, the administration pushed for the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, to replace NAFTA, aiming for more favorable terms for American workers. These policies reflect a shift towards bilateral agreements and a move away from multilateral trade frameworks. The focus was on creating trade terms that prioritized American economic interests, setting a precedent for future administrations to adopt more aggressive trade policies. Under Donald Trump's administration, there was a significant shift in how U.S. institutions approached international trade. Traditionally, trade policies were designed to foster economic collaboration. However, Trump's strategy marked a departure, seeing tariffs as tools of economic warfare rather than mere negotiation levers. This strategy involved the Department of Commerce and the U.S. Trade Representative's Office adopting aggressive stances, challenging long-standing trade agreements and revisiting the role of the World Trade Organization, WTO. Trump's approach was rooted in the belief that unfair trade practices were undermining the U.S. economy. By redefining tariffs as strategic weapons, the administration aimed to recalibrate global supply chains and reduce dependency on countries like China. This institutional recalibration strategically positioned the U.S. to exert pressure and renegotiate terms with trading partners, fundamentally altering the landscape of global trade. Key actors within the U.S. economic landscape, including multinational corporations, lobby groups, and trade unions, positioned themselves strategically in response to Trump's tariff policies. Corporations sought exemptions or adjustments to tariffs that impacted their supply chains, while lobby groups intensified their influence campaigns to sway policy decisions. Trade unions, on the other hand, were divided. Some saw potential job protection in Trump's policies, while others feared retaliatory measures from other countries could harm domestic employment.
The financial markets responded with volatility, as investors grappled with the uncertainty of shifting trade dynamics. Meanwhile, foreign governments and companies had to reassess their market strategies, with some seeking new partnerships or localizing production to mitigate tariff impacts. This realignment of actors highlighted the interconnectedness of global commerce and the ripple effects of U.S. policy changes. The U.S. government under Donald Trump developed strategic approaches to leverage tariffs as a means of economic leverage. The administration's strategies included targeting specific industries deemed vital to national security, such as steel and aluminum, with high tariffs to protect domestic producers. This move was justified by invoking national security concerns under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. Additionally, the U.S. sought to pressurize countries into renegotiating trade agreements that were perceived as unfair. This was evident in the renegotiation of NAFTA, leading to the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, which aimed to address trade imbalances and strengthen intellectual property rights. The strategy also extended to intellectual property theft, particularly with China, as tariffs were used as a penalty mechanism. These tactics were designed to realign trade relationships and assert U.S. dominance in global trade negotiations. Monetary policies during Trump's presidency also played a crucial role in the economic strategy involving tariffs. Fed Chair Jerome Powell's interest rate decisions were key in maintaining economic stability amidst trade tensions. The Federal Reserve often found itself in a delicate balance, aiming to support growth while managing inflation risks, especially as tariffs threatened to increase costs and prices. Trump's public pressure on the Fed to lower interest rates was a notable aspect, as he believed it would bolster U.S. competitiveness by weakening the dollar, thus offsetting tariff impacts. Additionally, the administration's fiscal policies, such as tax cuts, were intended to stimulate domestic investment and consumption, counteracting potential economic slowdowns from trade disputes. Together, these monetary and fiscal measures were integral to the administration's broader economic war strategy, aiming to cushion the domestic economy against international trade shocks. The dynamics of U.S. debt played a critical role in Trump's economic strategy. While tariffs were intended as a tool to reduce trade deficits, the growing national debt posed a complex challenge. Under Trump's administration, the national debt continued to rise, partly due to tax cuts and increased government spending aimed at stimulating economic growth. This paradox highlighted the tension between short-term economic boosts and long-term fiscal sustainability. The administration's reliance on debt to finance tax cuts and infrastructure projects was seen as a gamble to spur immediate economic activity. However, critics warned that this approach could lead to higher interest rates and inflation, potentially negating the benefits of tariff-induced trade balance improvements. The debt dynamics under Trump thus underscored the intricate balance between leveraging economic tools for immediate gains and ensuring long-term fiscal health. The market impacts of Trump's tariff policies were multifaceted, influencing various sectors differently. On one hand, domestic industries like steel and aluminum experienced short-term boosts as tariffs protected them from foreign competition. However, industries reliant on global supply chains faced increased costs, leading to price hikes and supply chain disruptions. The agriculture sector was particularly affected, as retaliatory tariffs from other countries, especially China, led to reduced demand for U.S. exports like soybeans and pork. Financial markets responded with volatility, as investors reacted to the uncertainty of trade negotiations and potential economic slowdown. Stock markets fluctuated, reflecting both optimism about protecting domestic industries and concerns about escalating trade wars. This complex web of market reactions demonstrated the intricate balance between protectionist policies and their broader economic consequences. Trade imbalances were a central focus of Trump's tariff strategy. The administration argued that the U.S. trade deficit, particularly with China, was a sign of unfair trade practices. By imposing tariffs, the goal was to reduce these deficits and encourage domestic production. However, the approach led to complex outcomes. While some industries saw increased local production, others faced retaliatory tariffs that hindered exports, complicating efforts to balance trade. The strategy also highlighted the interconnected nature of global trade, where imbalances are often the result of intricate supply chains and comparative advantages. Critics contended that tariffs might address symptoms rather than root causes of trade imbalances, such as currency manipulation or structural economic differences. This focus on trade deficits underscored the broader debate about globalization's impacts and the effectiveness of tariffs as a corrective tool. The effects of tariffs on currency dynamics were significant, as trade tensions often led to fluctuations in currency values. Under Trump's tariff policies, the U.S. dollar experienced periods of appreciation and depreciation, impacting international trade competitiveness. A stronger dollar made U.S. exports more expensive, potentially offsetting benefits from tariffs intended to protect domestic industries. Conversely, a weaker dollar could enhance export competitiveness, but risked higher import costs, contributing to inflationary pressures. The interconnectedness of currency values and trade policies highlighted the complexity of using tariffs as a standalone economic tool. Countries like China responded by managing their currency to stabilize trade impacts. This dynamic interplay between tariffs and currency values underscored the broader challenges of navigating global trade environments, where economic tools often have interconnected and sometimes conflicting effects. Economic stability was a critical concern amid Trump's tariff war strategy. While tariffs aimed to protect domestic industries, the broader economic impacts posed challenges to stability. The administration's strategy risked fueling inflation through increased import costs, potentially leading to higher interest rates. Furthermore, retaliatory tariffs threatened to disrupt exports, affecting sectors like agriculture and manufacturing. The uncertainty surrounding trade negotiations contributed to market volatility, challenging economic predictability. Despite these risks, the administration believed that tariffs would ultimately lead to a more balanced trade environment, fostering long-term stability. This belief was rooted in the expectation that fairer trade deals would enhance U.S. economic strength. However, the complexity of global trade and interconnected economies meant that achieving stability required careful navigation of both domestic and international economic landscapes. The interaction between various economic factors under Trump's tariff strategy created a complex system of effects. Tariffs influenced currency values, which in turn affected trade balances and market stability. Meanwhile, monetary policies aimed to counteract inflationary pressures and support economic growth. These interconnected dynamics often produced unintended consequences, such as supply chain disruptions and increased costs for consumers. The strategic use of tariffs highlighted the delicate balance required in economic policymaking, where actions in one area could lead to ripple effects across the entire economy. Understanding these interactions is crucial for navigating the complexities of global trade and ensuring that economic policies achieve their intended outcomes. Trump's strategy underscored the importance of considering how different economic tools interact and the broader implications for both domestic and international economic stability. The systemic effects of tariffs as economic weapons are profound and multifaceted. Initially, tariffs may seem like a targeted strategy to protect domestic industries by making foreign products more expensive. However, the ripple effects can destabilize global supply chains, increase consumer prices, and lead to retaliatory measures from other nations. For instance, when the United States implements tariffs, countries like China and the European Union might respond with their own tariffs, leading to a trade war spiral. This tit-for-tat escalation can disrupt international trade flows, impact global GDP, and cause uncertainty in financial markets. Furthermore, industries reliant on imported components face increased costs, which can lead to inflationary pressures within the domestic economy. The strategic intent to bolster local industries could backfire, resulting in reduced competitiveness on the global stage. These systemic effects highlight the complexity and potential unintended consequences of using tariffs as a tool of economic warfare. Historically, the use of tariffs as economic weapons is not new. Looking back to the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, we see a parallel where protectionist policies aimed to shield American industries during the Great Depression. However, this act is widely regarded as having exacerbated the economic downturn by stifling international trade. Fast forward to the early 21st century, and we observe similar dynamics during trade disputes between the U.S. and China under President Donald Trump. The tariffs imposed were part of a broader strategy to address trade imbalances and intellectual property concerns. Yet these actions also led to increased tensions and economic friction globally. The parallels highlight that while tariffs can be a tool for economic leverage, they often come with the risk of unintended negative consequences, such as prolonged economic stagnation and strained international relations. The lessons learned from Trump's economic strategy using tariffs are multifaceted. One major takeaway is the importance of understanding the interconnectedness of global economies. Tariffs aimed at one sector can reverberate across multiple industries, highlighting the necessity for comprehensive impact assessments before policy implementation. Another significant lesson is the resilience of global supply chains. While tariffs can temporarily disrupt these networks, corporations often adapt by seeking alternative suppliers or shifting production locations. Additionally, the strategy underscores the role of diplomacy in economic policy. Engaging in negotiations and building alliances can mitigate the negative effects of tariffs, as seen in the eventual trade agreements reached between the U.S. and several nations. Ultimately, the use of tariffs as economic weapons requires a nuanced approach, balancing short-term gains with long-term global economic stability. At the core of Trump's economic strategy lies a significant contradiction. While tariffs aim to protect domestic industries and reduce trade deficits, they can inadvertently harm the same sectors they intend to shield. For example, American farmers face challenges when retaliatory tariffs from China hit agricultural exports. This paradox highlights the delicate balance required in economic policymaking. Protecting one sector through tariffs can lead to job losses and increased costs in another, creating a complex web of economic interdependencies. Moreover, while tariffs are designed to foster economic self-reliance, they often lead to increased costs for consumers and businesses, ultimately reducing purchasing power. This contradiction underscores the necessity for policymakers to consider the broader economic picture and potential unintended consequences when formulating trade policies. The risks associated with tariff policies are numerous and can have long-lasting consequences. One primary risk is the potential for escalating trade conflicts, which can lead to a breakdown in diplomatic relations between countries. As seen with the U.S.-China trade war, initial tariffs can quickly spiral into broader economic tensions, affecting multiple sectors and global markets. Additionally, reliance on tariffs can create an unpredictable business environment where companies struggle to plan for future investments due to volatile trade policies. This uncertainty can stifle innovation and growth as businesses become hesitant to expand or enter new markets. Furthermore, tariffs can disproportionately impact small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, that lack the resources to adapt quickly to changing trade conditions. These risks highlight the need for measured and strategic trade policies that consider not only immediate economic gains, but also long-term global stability. Looking ahead, several future scenarios could unfold as a result of tariff policies. One possibility is increased regionalism, where countries form tighter trade blocs to protect against external economic pressures. This could lead to a realignment of global trade networks and the emergence of new economic alliances. Another scenario involves the technological adaptation of industries to bypass tariffs, such as through automation or reshoring production facilities. However, these strategies could further widen economic disparities between developed and developing nations. Another scenario involves the potential for heightened geopolitical tensions as nations vie for economic dominance and access to key resources. The future will likely depend on the ability of global leaders to negotiate trade agreements that balance national interests with the need for international cooperation.
These scenarios underscore the complexity of navigating a world where tariffs are wielded as economic weapons. Strategic pathways for addressing the challenges posed by tariff policies require a multifaceted approach. Firstly, diversifying trade partnerships can reduce dependency on any single market, minimizing the impact of tariffs from a specific country. Countries can explore new markets in emerging economies or strengthen regional trade agreements to enhance economic resilience. Secondly, investing in technological innovation can help industries adapt by improving efficiency and reducing reliance on imported components. This can involve government incentives for research and development in automation and alternative materials. Additionally, fostering diplomatic dialogues is crucial to prevent trade conflicts from escalating into larger geopolitical issues. By prioritizing international cooperation and understanding, nations can work towards mutually beneficial trade policies that support sustainable economic growth. These strategic pathways highlight the importance of proactive and adaptive strategies in navigating the complexities of global trade in the 21st century. If you found this perspective valuable, consider subscribing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. Thank you for watching.